Welcome to Hustle and Flow with Heather Hubbard, episode number 26. Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard, and I was a litigator, partner, and practice group leader at an AmLaw 200 firm. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your personal life. So how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you embrace your ambition without selling your soul? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast. Welcome back. I am your host, Heather Hubbard, and I am so excited about our episode today. I'm going to do something a bit different. It's new, and I'm really excited to see what you think about it. So I've been collecting information from you guys from the very beginning. If you go to hustleandflowpodcast.com/survey, you can tell me a little bit about yourself and tell me what you'd like to hear on the podcast. And you've been doing that. I started this podcast at the very end of February, and many of you have been completing that survey and letting me know your thoughts. And I've been incorporating that. I've tried to address some of the topics that you've asked me to touch upon, but I thought it would be fun to do something a little bit more formal, where I take your actual questions and answer them specifically. So what I would like to do is the first Tuesday of each month for the rest of 2017, I would like to take a listener question and answer it. You've got great questions. I have enough where I could already fill up the rest of the year, but if you've got a burning question and it ends up coming in with a little bit more priority, I'll throw you in first. So this is August. We know that we have at least 4 more opportunities for you to get your question in and answered. So go to hustleandflowpodcast.com/survey if you're interested in participating and have a question you'd like me to answer. Okay, so when I put this survey together, you'll notice when you go there, you can either submit it anonymously or you can tell me your name, because I'm going to reach out to some people just to have conversations to see, what you would like to hear, what you're struggling with. And by the way, if you submitted your name before and you've not heard from me, just know that that is happening in August. So you'll probably hear from my assistant and we will be talking soon, and I cannot wait. Okay, so let's do our topic, our listener question for this week. Now, this person did submit their name, but they did not submit it knowing that it would be on the podcast. So what we're going to do is we're just going to call her T. So T is a full-time attorney, and she has a young child. And although her husband is very supportive, he travels a lot for his work. So she's, the primary caregiver a lot when it comes to taking care of their child. And so she mentioned that she needs to go to the doctor for an issue, but she's been avoiding it because she just doesn't have time. She is no longer doing the things that she used to find enjoyable, such as yoga and swimming. And she's just struggling overall to figure out how to fit in self-care when she's so busy with her family and her career. So here's her exact question. How do I make time for my health, emotional well-being, and mental health without neglecting my career and family? Oh my goodness, T, this is such a good question. And you would be shocked at how many times I hear this similar question through email, when I'm at workshops or CLEs, people come up to me afterwards, or they just, while I'm coaching them, it just comes up, right? There is this feeling that we have to be everything to everyone, and there's only so many hours in the day, and the person that gets put last is ourselves. We tend to put ourselves last. And it's so important that we do make time for self-care. So I'm so glad that you asked this question so that we can have a conversation around it. Okay, so let's talk about the very first issue related to self-care. And that is that it is not a luxury. it is a necessity. It is not greedy. It is not selfish. It is generous, thoughtful, and kind. We tend to assume that if we are focusing on self-care, that we are being, self-absorbed, self-indulgent. And, it's really just this privilege, this first world privilege that we have to pamper ourselves. But that's really not what it is at all. And, for those that have visited third world countries, you know that self-care is actually still very important. It is part of the culture. It is part of the community. So it's not materialistic. It is not this luxury. It is a necessity if you're going to take care of those around you. And when people come to me with this position of how could I possibly take care of myself without neglecting those around me, it's obvious that you are a giver. Right? You are a giver. You are not a taker. You want to help others. You want to care for others. So your fear is that you're letting others down if you take care of yourself. And it's exactly the opposite. If you don't take care of yourself, you can't truly show up for those that you love. You can't truly show up for your career. So I've got a few different examples for you if you're still not really on board with this concept. And the first one, and I think the one that we probably hear the most that we can really relate to, is the concept of being on an airplane and putting on your oxygen mask first. So, it's the FAA rules, and the flight attendant will tell you that if you are there with a child or someone else that is in need of help, that it's important that you put your oxygen mask on first before you help them. Otherwise, what's going to happen is you may not even fully get their oxygen mask on before you lose, your own mental state. You don't have enough oxygen, and then neither one of you have the mask on. Right? Or you get it on them, but then you don't get it on yourself and they can't help you. And without you, that's not really helpful either. They need you in their life. So it's important that you have your oxygen mask on. And when you take care of yourself first, that then gives you the mental ability, the physical ability to help as many others as possible. Right? So if you get your oxygen mask on first, not only can you help, the child to your left, you can help the child to your right, you can start helping elderly people, you can help as many people as possible, right? As long as that cord will go, you can help everyone around you. But if you start trying to help others first, you're actually not helping them at all. You're letting down so many people that you could have helped. So if you were a giver, that analogy might help you see that taking care of yourself first actually is what gives you the ability to help more people. Okay? So here's another example. So imagine you just have a cup of water, right? Like this is a very simple analogy, but you have this cup of water and everyone's thirsty. And so you keep giving others a drink because they're thirsty and you want to give them a drink. And so you're giving your child a drink. You're giving your client a drink. This is starting for germaphobes. You hate this analogy, but you're giving everybody a drink, right? And it's getting low. And so you don't want to take a drink because you're still out there trying to help others. You want to make sure that they have all quenched their thirst. But if you constantly keep refilling it for yourself, right? If you keep refilling that cup, not only does it allow you to drink water, but it allows you to give it out to others, right? So if you are never refilling it for yourself, you're eventually going to run out and have nothing left to give. So for those of you that are givers, that can sometimes help reframe it. It can help give you perspective so that you understand self-care is actually not so much about you, but allowing yourself to show up more fully for others. Now, I would actually love for you to embrace the concept that you are important, that you are just as important as everyone else. But we do live in a culture where, especially girls, are raised to believe that they are caretakers and that their needs should always be met last. And so it is what it is. We're not going to go into, how to go about thinking that you are just as important as these other things. even though I think you are. I just want to make sure that you understand how, if you truly are a giver, not taking care of yourself is actually letting other people down. And a specific example for you, T, might be that, and I'm not going to share on the podcast what it was, but you had mentioned a specific health issue. And think about that. If you don't go to the doctor, if you don't get that seen, if you don't get that helped, it could get a lot worse. And if it gets a lot worse, that could impact your ability to take care of your children, right? What if you're then out even longer for something that requires recovery? Or what if it then makes it difficult for you to run around and play with them? And what if going to the doctor actually allows you to show up better for your children, your family, even your clients, right? I mean, this physical issue could technically even end up getting in your way of showing up to work. So if you think about it from that perspective, it might help you carve out the time to say, you know what, going to the doctor is actually super important, because if I let this go too far, I might then be undermining the very reason why I'm not going in the first place, because I'm here to serve and I want to help others. Okay, so hopefully you are on board with this concept that self-care is not selfish. And I would actually like you to reframe the question, if you're willing to, and flip it around to say, how do I make time for my career and my family without neglecting my health, emotional well-being, and mental health, right? Okay, so I'm going to say that again. We're flipping it around. How do I make time for my career and my family without neglecting my health, emotional well-being, and mental health? It's a great way to reframe the question so that you recognize that taking care of yourself first is what matters most. And that's what allows you to more fully show up for your career and your family. And then if we wanted to be really crazy, we might remove that word neglecting altogether, right? We're always balancing priorities, and it really is hard to do everything all at once. It's very difficult to be everything to everyone all of the time, but is neglecting the right word? So maybe it's just and. How do I make time for my health, emotional well-being, mental health, career, and family? Maybe there's this concept that if you're doing them all, it doesn't mean you're neglecting any one thing. Again, that's just a reset. It's a different perspective, but they're all super important. And one last thing before I move on to some tips on how to actually start doing some self-care, I just want to say I don't have kids. And so I am very reluctant to ever give advice on raising children because I don't have them. It's really, I should not have an opinion. That said, I was a child once, and I just have a human perspective. And I do think there's something to be said about role modeling for your children what you want for them. So to the extent this resonates, you can accept it. And if you think that, I am crazy, then you can feel free to just reject it. But when you think of your children, so T, I think you said you have one child. Think of that child. When that child grows up, do you want them to neglect themselves so that they're always caring for others? And maybe you do, but my guess is you don't, that you want them to have a very happy, healthy, fulfilled life in every single aspect. You want them to be a wonderful, family member. You want them to provide a service to society and to be a productive employee or owner one day, but you also want them to take care of their body. You want them to take care of their minds, of their emotional well-being. And so if you're always putting yourself last, you're actually role modeling for your child that that's what they're supposed to do as well. And I would love for you to role model for your child that their self-care is important, because when they become older or an adult, they're probably not going to remember so much the self-care that they were supposed to have as a child and look more to you as a mother and say, what did my mother do? Because that's the role model they're probably going to look to as an adult. Again, I don't have children, so if that is terrible advice, you can feel free to reject it. But if that resonates with you, I encourage you to think about it from that role modeling perspective and how you're actually giving your child some wonderful examples of how they can take care of themselves when they grow up. All right. So let's move on to how do you make time for it? Right? So if you're now in the mindset of, okay, this isn't selfish, it's actually important. Now it's like, okay, well, now I've got one more thing on my plate I have to do in order to show up for my family and my career. All right. So how do you do that? How do you make time if you have totally been neglecting self-care over the last few years, maybe decade? I don't know. I have a few different thoughts for you, but I'm actually going to invite all of you listening, especially for those of you that do have children, to go to the show notes page and leave T some comments. Let her know what has worked for you. So the show notes, that's going to be hustleandflowpodcast.com/26. I would love to see everybody give T some love and let her know what you do to carve out time for self-care. All right. So here are a few different ideas, and you've got to figure out what works for you. So definitely test it. And some of this, by the way, all of this doesn't work for me, but I know that some of this has worked for my clients. So I'm going to throw out all kinds of ideas so that you can play around and figure out what's going to work best for you, your personality, and your schedule. Okay. So the very first idea for you is to look at your mornings. So I know a lot of mothers that wake up a little bit early before their children get up so that they can have some kind of self-care time. And that looks different for everyone. For some, that means waking up and exercising. For others, that means waking up and doing, some meditation, some kind of spiritual or religious practice. For others, it's just having a cup of coffee and quiet, right? Self-care looks different for everyone. Now, if you're not a morning person and the thought of getting up, an hour earlier is just like, oh my gosh, don't do it. Don't even go there. Don't even go there. But if you might be a morning person or you're like, well, maybe I could do that. I'm willing to give it a try for maybe a week. Well, you had mentioned that you like yoga. Now, it's always a bit different when you can go to a yoga class versus doing it at home. I personally have a really hard time doing it on my own at home. I need to go to a class. But you know what? You can try it out. And there are so many different YouTube videos where you could just, turn something on and follow it there. Or if you've got a practice that you like, you can do your own. But have your yoga mat ready. Maybe wake up early, an hour earlier than you were. You don't need that much time, then, adjust it for you. And then see what happens when you wake up and you do some yoga. And maybe you only do that 2 or 3 times a week. You don't have to do it every single day. And just see what happens. That doesn't require you to even leave your house, but it might allow you to sneak in that self-care. And here's what's really, you can say interesting or bizarre. The thing about self-care is we assume that it's just one more thing on our plate, but if it's true, nourishing self-care, it actually gives us more energy. You might just be in a better mood, right? And it might help you reset for the entire day. So I would recommend giving that a try. That should be pretty simple just to add in and see what happens. And if you don't like mornings, then I want you to shift all the way to the other, and that's nights. Right? So I know a lot of people that put their kids to sleep and then they do some kind of self-care. And again, that's going to look different for everyone. But for some people, that is, just having a glass of wine and reading the New York Times. It might be watching a TV show that you really enjoy. It might be practicing yoga. I personally can't practice yoga at night, but that might be the perfect time for you. Right? So it really depends, do you prefer to wake up early? Do you prefer to stay up late? And then just incorporate some type of self-care for you. And because you mentioned yoga, that's why I keep bringing it up, but it could be something else. But just go ahead and just know that that's what you're going to do. And no matter how exhausted and tired you are, because when we're feeling depleted, we generally resist self-care, but that's when we need it the most. So just commit to doing it. Maybe say twice a week, whether it's morning or evenings, you go ahead and pick out what that self-care is going to look like, and it's non-negotiable. You're going to do it. And I would try that out for an entire month just to see how it improves your daily life and your overall well-being. Okay, so you've got mornings, you've got evenings. Another wonderful time is sometime throughout the workday, right? So if, your child is at school and you're at work, and so I'm sure you're thinking, well, now I'm in work mode. My guess is, T, that you are always in work mode or family mode, right? There's no in between. And that's part of why it's hard for you to figure out, well, where do I fit in? So the first two examples we were talking about really fit within your family time, if you truly are compartmentalizing it like that. If you are then at work, you're thinking, well, I have to be working all the time. Well, you generally can find some hours there as well to fit in some activities. So for a lot of people, that's lunch. Now, I actually don't like to work out or do things during lunch because I don't want to get sweaty and I don't want to have to wash my hair. But for others, it's not a big deal, right? You know your personal preferences, and you don't actually have to exercise. It could be reading a book. It could be listening to a podcast. It could be calling a friend. It could be any number of things, right? But if you think that might be a good time for you to carve something out, then just commit to it. It could be picking a time, whether it's like 10 a.m. or 2 p.m., for just going for a walk by yourself with no agenda. Maybe it could take 10 minutes. And, the research shows that when we are exhausted and when we are overwhelmed, I talked about this some with our productivity podcast episode, even though you think that you're being super productive, you're not, because you're just not as effective. So giving yourself that mental break to just take a walk around the block or go sit on a park bench, that's going to help you reset so that when you get back to the office, you're more productive. You're not actually losing any time because you're going to be more efficient and more effective. Another thought for you, T, and this is very specific to you and it may not work, but depending on where you are, presumably there's a YMCA or a gym or a public or private pool somewhere where maybe you and your child could go together. What if I'm not a fan of multitasking, but what if you combined it? If you enjoy swimming, what if you found a time to go swim when your child could also have swimming class lessons or some other kind of activity that they really want to go to that would be fun for them? So basically it's kind of like free babysitting while you're swimming and you're in the same building together. I could see that being a great way. You're bonded, you're connected, but you're each getting your own time. So that's just another idea. And then last, I would love to see you take one day a month for you. And if that sounds really scary and not doable, then I would like to see you take a half day for yourself, but it needs to be a half day. So, and I really prefer it to be probably a work day because my guess is weekends might actually be harder for you because I know family's super important to you. And, we can adjust our work schedules. If we're really effective and efficient in our work, we can create these times for ourselves. The key is going to be scheduling it, because if you just wait for it to happen when you're like, oh, now is a good time for me to take a half day or a day, it's not going to happen. So you have to go ahead and say, this is when it's going to be. And, maybe it is the third Wednesday of every month. I don't know. It doesn't matter, but go ahead and pick what it's going to be. And I don't care what firm you work for. You can figure out a way to take a half day or a full day once a month. And you may or may not even need to have a conversation with anyone about that. You might just be able to do it. It really depends on your firm, but you absolutely can make it happen, especially because I know you are at a firm, as long as you're hitting your billable hours or your goals, it's not going to be that big of a deal. And it may just involve you having that discussion if you need to. Again, you may not. All right. So here's what happens on your half day or your full day. Well, one, you know it's coming. So it makes it really easy for you to call your doctor and schedule an appointment because you know when it is, right? If it's the third Wednesday of every month, when you call to make an appointment and they're like, when can you come in? You can say, well, I'm available on the third Wednesday of every single month. When is the first one of those Wednesdays available for you? And then you just schedule it. And you know that you're going to have time to do it because you've already carved it out. Maybe you are running other errands or you're doing other things that you've been neglecting for yourself. Maybe you need a new pair of pants and you've been putting it off. That could be ordering it online or going to try them on. There are a million examples. T, I don't know exactly where all you need to be taking care of yourself, but I have a feeling there's a lot there. And I think you could totally fill up a half day or a day. And if, you've got your doctor's appointments, you've got things like that, and you come up with a month where there's nothing going on, well, then you've got a clean slate to do whatever you want. Maybe it's just a staycation and you stay at the house and you try not to, do a million tasks or chores. You just do whatever you want to do. Maybe you go to the spa. Maybe you go get a massage. Maybe you have a girlfriend that doesn't work. Maybe she's a stay-at-home mom and you just go hang out with her. I don't know. But I really think that you're carving out a half day or a full day each and every month that you know is coming up and just spending that time on you, I think that can really help turn the tide. And it's going to help you see how when you take care of yourself, it gives you so much more energy and happiness and presence to then show up for others. T, I think that you are valuable, you are important, and that you are worthy of self-care. And when you start practicing even more self-care, you're going to see it allows you to show up and be even more generous for those around you. So for those of you that have enjoyed this episode and you have your own thoughts, again, head on over to hustleandflowpodcast.com/26 and let T know what you think. And if you struggle, just raise your hand and say, yeah, I've got this issue too. So if you got some great ideas from this episode, wonderful. And maybe you'll get some in the comments as well. I hope you've enjoyed this new format. Like I said, we're going to do this the first Tuesday of every single month. So the next one will be in September. So if you want to get your question answered, go on over to hustleandflowpodcast.com/survey. Fill it out. Let me know what your question is, and maybe I will answer yours. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week. Bye, guys. Are you feeling stuck or frustrated in your career? Are you exhausted from trying to balance so many competing demands? Do you have big dreams and goals, but no time to focus on them? Then join me in a small group of female attorneys for the Life and Law in Balance retreats at Miraval. They're coming up in September. To learn more and register, go to lifeandlawinbalance.com. I'd love to meet you there.